Welcome to another program in our series, Free Thinking Forum. I'm Bill Weir, and producer and host, and I'm here today with Mikki Morrissette. She is a longtime communications specialist and journalist who worked in New York City publishing for 18 years before returning to her Minneapolis roots. She now focuses on developing websites that use storytelling to inspire individual and collective change, such as mplsgreen.com, about sustainability innovators in Minneapolis, and connectedinthedeep.com, about the science underlying potential consciousness of the universe. Her monthly column, Sustainable We, appears in the Southwest Journal in Minneapolis. Her focus in her second half of life, as she calls it, is to be about interconnectedness as a species and as a universe. Welcome to the program,
Thank
Mikki.
you. Thanks, Bill.
And one of your websites is called connectedtothedeep.com. How does that website come about?
Yeah, actually, I was going to call it the non-hippy-dippy guide to the universe.
Oh!
But a neighbor who's a brand marketing specialist convinced me to change the name. And so Connected in the Deep actually comes from a William James quote that I love. We are all islands in the sea, separated on the surface, but connected in the deep. And that has a lot to do with everything I seem to be exploring and interested in these days, which is about how, we all have our individual viewpoints and experiences, and how do we interact then with the community that we're also part of. I'm a very self-sufficient, independent person, but as I've gotten older, I've also recognized the supreme value of being part of community. And for me, then, yes, in this second half somewhere of life, I am really looking at both consciousness and sustainability as a community, how we are indeed, as James said, we're separated individuals, but I don't believe even our consciousness, we have our own individual memories, but I do believe there's a collective unconscious underneath everything, whether it's related to the ethics that we develop as a society. We do transform in time, so I do believe that there is a lot underneath the surface, underneath the quantum level somewhere, that connects us. And that's a lot of what connectedinthedeep.com looks at, some of the science and scientists I've been able to talk to about
Scientists?
it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Want to learn more about that?
Yep.
Connected in the Deep, with no spaces, .com. So viewers might want to go there. Well, keep tuned now. We got a lot more. But take note, connectedinthedeep.com. Now, who are some of these scientists that you've talked with?
Yeah, I've gone to a few events now around the country. It's fun because I used to be a sports writer, and then I wrote a book called Choosing Single Motherhood, which meant I ended up writing a lot about fertility and sperm. And my career has evolved in time, and as I've started looking into this, I now go to these fascinating conferences. The Institute of Noetic Sciences hosts one, SAND, which is about the science of non-duality, very great organization.
What's that stand for?
SAND is science and the science of non-duality, something like that.
Yeah.
They actually meet in a few weeks in San Jose. And they have these...
Good reason for a trip out to
It
California.
is. I went last year. It was fantastic. I should be there this fall as well.
Good.
But what it does is it gathers together everyone from like Deepak Chopra to, last year I met Rudolph Tanzi, who's an Alzheimer's researcher based at Harvard.
Yeah.
He has used lucid dreaming to come up with some key breakthroughs in Alzheimer's research, so he's a very left-brain, science-based man who also believes in some of the Eastern aspects that we don't always understand. At an event in Chicago recently, I met Lauren Carpenter, who was the guy that came up with the 3D imagery that led to Pixar and the movie Toy Story, and
yes.
he is interested in mapping the brain, the consciousness. He's a fascinating man. It's a hard task, but that's what he's going to try to figure out.
Mapping the brain.
Mapping the brain, and then I met Neil Tice. Was fascinating. He's a liver pathologist who reminds us that our cells and molecules and viruses are always being exchanged. So we're never, he said, for a cancer pathologist who looks in microscopes, he says he never thinks of human beings as individuals like most of us do, because the cells are always morphing and changing into something else.
Yeah, our body is constantly replacing cells.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And but Neil Tice has some insights on cancer.
It's his profession. He's a cancer pathologist, but he's also very much a Zen Buddhist. So again, there's more people merging the Western science with some of the Eastern philosophies, and they're getting together to talk at these conferences. And I think it's really fascinating what they're looking at. There's some great quantum physicists involved in the discussion as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got my first degree in physics. Maybe I'll go on out there too.
Yeah, it's a great conference. I love that one.
Yeah. And that's SAMS.
SAND.
SAND.
Science and non-duality. Yeah.
Good. And now, how did you get interested in this topic of consciousness?
Yeah, well, I am very left-brained, very analytical. I grew up as a journalist, was always looking for facts. But I've had a few bizarre experiences, and that kind of forced me to realize that maybe I don't know as much about my own awareness as we tend to think we do. I lived in New York City on the morning of 9/11. I woke up from a nightmare at 6:30 in the morning, which I learned later was the same time the terrorists were boarding the planes in Boston. And I woke up from a nightmare that there were thin, young, dark-skinned men going down an alleyway with the intent to kill people. And I never have nightmares, so it was, I woke up that morning obviously not knowing for a few hours that anything was happening, but it freaked me out that morning.
Yeah.
And then years later, after I had moved back here to Minneapolis, I have 2 kids, and I was with my younger son driving under a bridge when I was kind of struck by this thought of how terrible it would be if a bridge collapsed. And it was just 3 days after that 35W bridge collapsed. That was the bridge I was driving under.
Precognition.
Yeah, so I definitely, everybody has different things and different quirks, and I know other people who have felt somebody passing, and other things like that just are not easy to explain, and you can certainly chalk it up to coincidence. But I've had enough of those kind of premonition things, especially dreams seem to come in dreams for me. That, again, as a left brain analytical person, I'm very interested in what we don't know about what we don't know.
Well, that's a good scientific approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
To accept what your experience is, and do your best to understand it.
Yeah, and the challenge is it's hard to measure. You can't really measure consciousness. Nobody's been able to figure that out. So we do tend to feel, sometimes it's called woo-woo science. But it's, there's stuff we don't know, and that's what this body of scientists is starting to look at.
Well, I'm excited about seeing what they're coming up with. Tell us about the work of Rupert Sheldrake.
Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake. I love Rupert Sheldrake. He's a biologist in the United Kingdom, I believe based at Cambridge, and he has done a lot of research in animals. And, you know, I mean, there's so many things there, too, that we can't explain. Dogs who seem to know when their owners are coming home or are in some kind of crisis. You know, we don't understand migratory patterns. How do they communicate? How do termites know how to build what they build? You know, there's all sorts of things that...
I saw a PBS special on that.
Really?
E.O. Wilson.
E.O. Wilson last night, yeah. Ant and the Man or something, yeah.
The ants know how to drop their pheromones along the trail.
Yeah, so there's all these sort of different levels of communication that are not related to the 5 senses we've grown up. I think.
So how many senses do we have?
Well, Rupert actually believes we have 7, at least 7.
What are the 2 additional ones?
Sixth sense is, I think, that premonition aspect where we feel like there's something beyond time and space that we can't quite pinpoint. And seventh sense, he feels, is that ability to sort of communicate at a different level, a kind of almost an energy field of some sort, where it enables you to communicate without language.
Well, we know about matter and energy. Are we now creating a new concept of thirds? That's
actually, I mean, the paradigm shift that a lot of people are getting excited about is related to this idea that at some point the body of scientists will come around to feeling that awareness is a third element.
Awareness?
Yep. And that,
not consciousness?
It's tricky. Consciousness means different things to different people, the definitions and terms. Awareness is more of a, and it's related also, detectives and soldiers and pilots, athletes. There's always, there's people who can kind of read things differently, and we don't really know why.
Now, I understand you co-founded a consciousness circle.
Yeah.
What is that about?
Yeah, there's a group of us. It's actually related to the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is based in California. It came out of Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon in the 70s. As he was coming back, he had a transcendent experience that made him realize that in his science that he'd grown up with, he felt like as he was coming back, everything in the universe was interconnected. And it was such a strong feeling that when he came back to Earth, he decided to create this institute. And so now there's chapters around the world.
Which institute?
Institute of Noetic Sciences.
And what does noetic mean?
It's of knowledge, of the mind. And
related to Gnostics?
Oh, it might be, although it's spelled differently.
Yeah, Gnostics has a G in front of it.
And this is...
But noetic science sounds related to that.
So he created this in the chapters, and we, another woman, Ann Thompson, and I co-founded a local chapter. So we get together in living rooms or Lake Harriet Spiritual Center, and we meet on a monthly basis to talk about different things that we don't understand.
What somebody would call a weird experience.
Yeah, or hippy-dippy, that's what, So, but we have, IONS, IONSMN.com is where we talk about the meetings that are coming up if people are interested in attending those.
Good. Now, you are also writing about sustainability of the local community.
Yeah.
Is that related?
Yeah, I started both of these interests at the same time, which seems silly because it's stretched me in very wide topics at the same time. But again, I was done with sports and was getting tired of writing about sperm. And as I was branching into other things, these were the things that were both pulling at me. And I started them concurrently. And as I got into exploring more and more, realized it is about the same thing. It is about interconnectedness, whether it's interconnectedness of a sense of consciousness or interconnectedness of our ecosystem. What we do here affects something else. I was at a recent debate, basically. A group of people in Loring Park were upset that pesticides are being used by the park board when we know that it has an impact on pollinators. How do we have these conversations so that we can talk about how each piece of the puzzle fits together? How do we deal with invasive species as well as other aspects of things? And it's, because it's tricky. Nothing is black and white. And so I kind of led to a series of forums I'm going to launch in October. The first one is actually going to look at pollinators, parks, and pesticides.
That's October 2016?
October this year.
Oh, 2015?
Yeah, October 20th. The first one's going to be at First Unitarian Society, and that one is about pesticides, and then I'll do a...
And is there a fee for coming?
There is. I'm charging, at this point, only $5.
That sounds like a bargain.
Yeah.
Just to get a seat.
Yes, and that covers rent, basically. Hopefully covers rent, and we'll see if I can fill up the spaces. So yeah, that forum is October, and then I'll do one each month.
What day of the week is that?
That one is, I believe that one's on a Tuesday, October 20th.
Tuesday, October 20th?
Yep.
Now, by the time you see this, it may be past.
Yep.
2015. And at what time?
7 p.m. I've got
7
somebody from the park board, somebody from the University of Minnesota, others who are coming. And then I'll do another one in November somewhere else, and that one's on changing our habits of consumption and waste.
And could people learn more about this from a website?
Yes. I have a whole list of the forums I'm doing listed at mplsgreen.com.
mplsgreen.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm calling them Sustainable We forums because, again, we all have a collective impact. Our individual lives and our individual choices are all connected to community. We can't do one without affecting the other.
Now, is this the series of forums you're calling Sustainable?
Yeah, and there's a
Sustainable We?
Yes, Sustainable We, which is the name of the column I also have in Southwest Journal, and it's about how do we kind of nudge our individual selves and living in our individual homes, having our individual lives. How do we kind of nudge into being mindful of the fact that we're also still part of a collective? And again, the ecosystem and everything else is connected. So we all have to be, it's everything related to climate change and everything else. Everything that we do has an impact on everything else. So I call it Sustainable We because it's going to take a collective impact and a collective effort from our individual lives to kind of get a few things to shift enough so that we're not destroying too many things.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important. I sure want to be a supporter of sustainability of us humans.
Yeah.
And I've been looking into whether there is, as some people think, a threat from artificial intelligence.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we'll talk more about that another time. But at a talk you recently gave at First Unitarian Society, you talked about something Reverend David Breeden said that inspired you.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, he said, it was a line in a talk he gave earlier in 2015. He said that people look for truth because they want to find something that never changes.
Yeah.
But everything changes. So
even truth.
Even truth. So, and it's true. If you look at, you have as a writer, I always think, I've just created the perfect sentence that explains this, and then I look at it the next day and it's like, no. And, everything, we find the perfect job, or we find everything changes because again, with this connectedness, we've got different things impacting us, different people impacting us who have been impacted themselves. It's impossible truth is kind of a linear concept, and I'm a storyteller from birth, but I no longer kind of believe there's a beginning, middle, and end, even though that makes it simpler to tell the story. I think there's a circular...
I thought we had to have beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, it does make it easier for us to concentrate on a structure and a sense of story, but I think the truth of the matter is we're a circular story in motion, and I think that's part of I think we're part of the universe story.
Oh, yes. Now, I've heard you're also interested in the concept of pivot points.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Pivot points. For a while, I thought that was going to be my next website. And
Pivot points.
I had too many. Yeah, I love this.
Hadn't somebody already taken that?
Yeah, actually they did. So, but the idea is, a group of a couple meetings, and at the very beginning, as we did introductions, the guy who was leading it asked each of us to talk about a transitional moment in our lives that impacted our sense of morality or ethics.
Oh.
And there was so much that came out of that the rest of the sessions were just devoted to that. And I realized that for me, I had a pivotal moment as a child in the 60s. My parents took in a couple singers from Chicago, black singers from Chicago that were traveling through as part of a gospel group. Mm-hmm. They took them into our home. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My neighbors across the street were livid that we were housing these black people in our house for a few days. And this made me, I just couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
But it was a pivotal moment for me, and we all have many of those pivotal moments where things sort of hinge on something somebody says or does. And so I love the concept of having us be able to talk about and explore what those transitional moments in our lives have been, because we don't really talk about it that often.
Yeah, very important. I think of transitional moments in my life, and but yours was that moment of hearing the complaints from your neighbors about having black guests stay over in your home.
And for me, it was related to tolerance and not understanding how people could be so close to a different group of people. And so a lot of what I realized been inspired by over time, and some of the social justice work that brought me to Unitarian Universalism is about related to tolerance and people being judgmental or feeling that they were above somebody else. So
well, E.O. Wilson remarked in that PBS special about tribalism, and the white tribalism can be deadly to our future. So the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is focusing on that white privilege that is all too often assumed by white people unconsciously. And there's even that between men and women. Mansplaining is an example of that. Where men talk down to women condescendingly.
Reverend Breeden talked about that a few weeks ago, and then Jim Foti also recently did a great talk about how we turned Crater Lake into a sea of fish because we thought that was best, even though for 7,000 years there were no fish there because they weren't really supposed to be there.
It's not a good lake for fish.
So that idea of human domination and is, again, it's
humans
all
know right.
It's all related. We've put ourselves above the spider web, and we're starting to recognize that we're actually in it, not above it.
What a good way to say it. We put ourselves above the spider web, and we're actually in it, not above it. Yeah, because everything, so much of what we do affects others. Now, we've got about 6 minutes left, so what is next? You've got such a marvelously eclectic collection of projects. You have closed down a few of them.
I have. I mean, I still do. Choice Moms is the first website I ever created. It's for a community of women around the globe who chose to become single mothers, as I did. So I created choicemoms.org. I wrote a book called Choosing Single Motherhood to help those of us that were trying to figure out how to do this and what we needed to know, what we needed to do, what our fertility window was. So I gave about 25 workshops over the years.
I've looked at that website.
Yeah,
it looks like it's a very good website.
It's hundreds of articles because I just love to write. But so I've done that. I've written the things that I needed to write. The community still uses it. I've got a couple thousand people who are on my discussion boards. About 5,000 people visit the website each month. So it's kind of done now, and so I started moving into other things. And I do have, my dream is to get to the Oregon coast someday after my kids are off to college and young adulthood and things. If I haven't, I'm hoping I can do this. I haven't had to go back to full-time work, but these things
Well,
are not highly paying, so I don't know. But
well, you apparently get along pretty well as an independent contractor.
yes, and so I'm hoping to maintain
For
that.
the New York Times, for the
Yeah,
Time magazine.
that was when I was in New York, and yeah, so I still am a communications specialist here, but I'm hoping to be able to go to the Oregon coast. I've got 2 novels I've been working on. I'd like to get back to those, but I also I've talked with a colleague. We're going to do something called Connected Chronicles, which is a combination of the 2 websites each of us has been doing, and it's a multi-media, multi-dimensional story of the ongoing universe. You know, again, not being linear, but telling it in a circular way. Everything, you know, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to get to it and sometime soon. It's fascinating to me, but I don't quite have the time right now.
Now, you speak about the circularity of the universe, and you're speaking not of geographical, but over time.
Yeah.
And I've heard that the universe is not accelerating in its expansion. It's still expanding, but it's decelerating, and it could conceivably stop expanding and start pulling together again.
Yeah, and
Is that part of what you're referring to?
Well, I think the circular story is, I feel Thomas Nagel has a quote about that we are the ongoing story of the universe.
Indeed.
As we evolve, as our planet evolves, as the galaxies evolve, I think the universe expands with that, because again, I am of the view that consciousness is an element just like matter and energy. So as long as our consciousness continues to evolve, which sometimes it doesn't seem like it is, I feel that's part of this ongoing story of the universe that Thomas Nagel talks about. And it's basically about the universe becoming more and more aware of itself, and we're part of that awareness.
Yeah. Well, wow. What an array of things you've already done in your short life.
Yeah. Well, I'm a multitasker, but
Yes, you are. And you claim to be embarked on the second half of your life.
Yeah.
You don't look that old.
Yes, well, I'm over the cusp of 50 now, so yeah. But I've got 2 young kids, so they, because I chose single motherhood later in life, so they keep me young.
Good. Well, we've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I guess I'll just add that, so I've been doing for-profit communications, which is under my B Mondo publishing company, and that's where I do things to make money, or try. And then, but I'm starting to develop a nonprofit now, and I would love a network of people that want to work with me on it. It's a nonprofit called CollectiveImpact.me, and again, it's related to this sustainable we idea. There's so many issues that we need a collective impact on.
Wow. That could be very important. Collective Impact, no space, .me.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to finding
Yeah.
out what have you got there?
Yeah, it's still new, but I know, climate change, reuse, sex trafficking, all the sustainability, there's so many things that we can't tackle without having ourselves be part of the consciousness and awareness of what's going on. So it would cover a wide variety of things as a collective. So.
Well, I think you're going to have quite an impact on the world and the universe.
Collective impact.
Yeah, be part of it. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Mikki. You certainly stimulated our brains to think in terms of our connection to one another.
Yeah.
And I hope we can keep connected too.
Indeed.
To keep up with what you're about as you build CollectiveImpact.me and go on with your column in Southwest Journal here in Minneapolis. And what else? I guess